This episode is powered by Dialect Imports, tasty language of Italian terroir.
Well, my father didn't start his business as a wine producer, but in the early 2000, he came back home and he said, "I bought a vineyard," and and I didn't know if I had to laugh or be surprised, or I didn't know what would be my reaction. But then that day we went to see this vineyard, and we got to the property, and I remember we couldn't enter the gate because it was a forest. It wasn't a
Oh
vineyard.
my.
It was a forest because it was a very old vineyard abandoned in 1950.
Amazing.
And we took the vineyard from there, and now we are in full production and in this business.
Fascinating people with stories to share, fabulous wines and the best local foods to accompany them, and beautiful places to discover and visit. All of this and more on Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast. Join me for a new episode every Tuesday. Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Today's show takes us to Sicily, to the eastern flank of Mount Etna, in the small wine town of Milo, to meet my guest, Marco Iuppa of Azienda Agricola Iuppa. Thanks so much for being with us this morning, Marco. How are you today? And is Etna calm this morning?
Hello, Mark. Yes, I'm very good. Etna is calm today, and thank you for inviting me here.
Okay, is it a beautiful day where you are?
It is. It's a little bit windy, but no clouds, and a beautiful view of the sea from here, from Mount Etna. We are very high on Mount Etna, 700 meters above the level of the sea, but I can see clearly the sea from here.
Okay, well, I know you're on the eastern flank of Etna, so I imagine you're looking down on the Ionian Sea, and those winds, that wind you're talking about, that's very beneficial for you and for your vines, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Also because in Milo here, that is a very small village, but has a lot of potential in wine speaking, because it's the only little village that can produce Etna Bianco Superiore. And here in Milo, there is a very high percentage of rain that without this wind that we are talking about would make some mold on the grape. But thanks to the wind that dries this water, it works all perfectly,
Okay, well, Marco, you're giving a good impression for our listeners who are located all around the world. But I'd like you to perhaps give us a broader view of where you are, of Etna, of life and work on the most active volcano in Europe, and just describe Etna and the surrounds, and then a greater detail of Milo, as I say. You've already taken us there with your description, looking down on the beautiful Ionian Sea from the eastern flank. So take us to Etna, Marco.
All right. So I was born in here on Mount Etna in Catania. And I have to say that Mount Etna is something very important for all the people from Catania and all the city around Catania. Catania is the main city that, of course, Milo is one of the villages of Catania. And talking about Etna is a very active volcano. We have between 10 or 30 eruption per year, so it's very active, and every time there is an eruption, for us is a very nice event. We always look at the eruption. You see lines of cars in the street stopped on the side just to look at the eruption of Mount Etna. This is something that may scare some tourists, but it's for real just spectacular. And I get this question a lot: isn't it dangerous? And my answer is no. And putting it in percentages, I would say that we are 90% safe, and then there is that 10%, The 90% safe is because Mount Etna is very high as a volcano. and is 3,500 meters about of height, and Mount Etna is, all pretty much all the eruption come down as a lava river on the east part, so towards us. But on our side, there is a valley that we call Valle del Bove that was created 9,000 years ago. The Mount Etna collapsed on the east side. So you have to imagine that Mount Etna is a layer after layer of eruptions and lava rivers. And so it became too heavy and it collapsed. And that's exactly where Milo is, on the east part. So we are on a mix of geological era of lava, and that's exactly where we grow our plants. So, talking about again where we are exactly, the eastern part of Mount Etna is between the main crater and the coast. And in front of me, I can see exactly the entire coastline that goes from Messina to Syracuse. And over the sea, I see Calabria, that it's mainland Italy.
That's a really beautiful description, Mark, and I think it's very important. I've been to Etna a number of times myself and spoken with many people, and what I've gained is this almost an affection that you feel for your mountain, for Etna. And as you say, that's surprising perhaps to those of us who find volcanoes frightening, who think that a volcano that's erupting is dangerous. I was on Etna last. It was 2021 or 2022, the year that Etna erupted, I think about 60 times, and it was erupting while we were there as well, which was yeah. But it's a huge mountain, and perhaps, Marco, because of these frequent eruptions, there's a very different perception of it than, say, Vesuvio, where I've also been. I'm going next week, where it hasn't erupted for a long time, but there's always this sense that when it does, it could be a really big eruption.
Yeah, two different volcanoes completely. Vesuvio, I believe the last eruption was during the Second World War, and it was recorded, and we have images of that. Mount Etna erupts every year. The number of times that I already said, it's crazy and spectacular.
Yeah. Now, Marco, you're born in Catania and you're from this area. You've lived there all your life, but you went away to study. Why did you go away to study and where did you go? Tell us about that.
All right. It's a funny story because during my school here in Italy, I've been studying English pretty much every year, but my English was very poor. Then in 2008, I graduated in high school here, so I was free to go to university. And I actually started university in Italy. But then in the summer 2008, my uncle from the States, which is now also my importer with his daughter Christina Solazzo, they have this company called Dialect Import. They came to Sicily to see my family, of course. And my uncle started to talk to my father saying, my daughter goes to this college in Florida, in St. Petersburg. It's a very beautiful college. It's called Ecker College. And it's on the coast. So Marco likes fishing. So he can go there and go fishing also, and then he can start studying English in a serious way. And who knows, maybe he can study at Ecker College. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay, so how many years were you there, Marco?
About 5 years. 5 years.
About 5 years. So quite a formative period of your life when you were spending time in America. And then you decided to come back, to return to your home. Did you always think that you wanted to enter the family wine business?
Yes. I always wanted to go back to Italy. I knew that was the experience of my life, being in the States and learning new languages, new cultures, because the States, it's a lot of culture put all together, and that's exactly what I did. I learned about the people from the States, from South America, and now I have friends all around the world. And it's fun because every time I travel, I call a friend to see anywhere in the world, you know?
Yeah.
About the business of the family. Well, you know, my father didn't start his business as a wine producer. He is actually a builder. He builds warehouses for logistic purpose. But in the early 2000, he came back home and he said, "I bought a vineyard." And and I didn't know if I had to laugh or be surprised, or I didn't know what would be my reaction. But then that day we went to see this vineyard, and we got to the property, and I remember we couldn't enter the gate because it was a forest. It wasn't a
Oh
vineyard,
my.
it was a forest because it was a very old vineyard abandoned in 1950.
Amazing.
And we took the vineyard from there, and now we are in full production and in this business.
That's an amazing story, Marco. And I think it's a very important story because Etna is one of the most ancient winelands in Italy, in Europe, in the world, with grapes cultivated on the volcanic slopes for possibly close to 3,000 years. I know in Homer's Odyssey, for example, the Cyclops Polyphemus is growing grapes possibly on the slopes of Etna. And yet, Etna as a quality wine region, as a wine region that excites the world, has emerged only in the last 30 years or so. So your father, in buying that vineyard in the early 2000s, was really a visionary in joining this new renaissance of Etna wines and seeing the potential to make exciting wines. And the other point I think that comes from that, and we'll discuss this too, Marco, is that this was an overground. Was it a palmento that you purchased?
Together with the palmento, which is the word to say the cellar where they were producing the wine in the past. The palmento
Yes.
structure.
Okay, so the volcanic stone structure where wine was made very simply in the past. But you mentioned that the vineyard had been abandoned in the 1950s. So these are old vines then that you restored.
Right, right. Well, not all of them, because we found just one piece of this land that had still live vines, but all the
Okay.
rest was a forest. We could see all the dead vines under these huge trees, but it was to replant almost 90%. Then we have still untouched this piece of a vineyard where we grow the same plants that were planted more than 100 years ago,
Okay.
and we actually bottled them in one all in one bottle to make a very good wine, you know.
Oh, we'll discuss that. This is your Piedefranco wine. We'll discuss that one. Now, Marco, Etna as a wine region, as I say, has really excited the world, both for the red wines, the Etna Rosso from Nerello Mascalese and Nerello Cappuccio, beautiful rosés, and also for some really exciting and magnificent white wines from the Carricante grape. And I know that where you are, the eastern flank of Etna, is where some of the great white wines of Etna come from. Can we start in talking about the white wines you produce and what's unique about the eastern flank to make such high quality wines from Carricante? Tell us about Carricante as well.
Perfect. Yes. So let's start from the word, the carricante. Carricante is a plant that was planted in many years ago here because means caricare, means that heavy loads, you know. And so in the
Okay.
past, what was important wasn't the quality; it was the quantity, right? So for a person that just had a vineyard to live, to give food to their family. The important thing was how much wine can I produce. And so Carricante would give a lot of grape, and it was a great choice for that time. Now we use it in a different way. What a plant can produce, it's a big load, but we leave on the plant just the necessary to make the right quality that we want. So it's about 1 kilo per plant.
Okay, very low.
Yes, exactly. And what makes it unique is the terroir of Milo. As I said, Milo is the only village that can produce the Etna Bianco Superiore. And the peculiarity of Milo is the rain, it's the wind, but it's also the ash and the sand of the volcano that every time that it erupts releases on the land. So it's not just the lava river mixed all together because of the collapse of Mount Etna that we grow our plant on, but it's also fresh minerals coming from the sky every time that the Etna erupts. This is something that I think it's unique in the world, and it's very important for our wine because all of this that I'm saying, you taste it in the wine, you taste minerals, you taste the freshness that comes from the sea that is very close. In a linear view, the sea from where we are, it's, I would say, 8 kilometers, but we are on top of a volcano.
Okay, that is a really, really good description of what makes the white wines of Etna so exciting. This particular grape, Carricante,
Right,
but grown in such a way as to restrict yield, to give a more concentration to the flavor. High acidity as well. Is that
right.
right, Marco? That
It,
acidity which keeps it fresh, but which also allows the white wines of Etna, the Bianco Superiore especially, to age well, to evolve for upwards of 10 years or perhaps even more. Very exciting wines. And
yes,
you and that ash that you're talking about, that sand. I've actually been on the east flank that year I was in, and it is extraordinary. I mean, it's like it's raining,
right,
but black bits. They get in your hair, they get on the car, they get on
yes,
the roofs, and it is quite an extraordinary thing to experience. But that's very interesting that you're saying that this intense minerality is enriched constantly. It's not just ancient lava that's broken down for the soil.
right.
Can we talk in particular about a couple of your wines? Now, I was a bit confused because is the Lindo an Etna Bianco Superiore or is it an IGT?
No, Lindo is an Etna Bianco Superiore, and
Okay.
right now we have two Etna Bianco Superiore, the Lavi and the Lindo. It's different how we blend them and how we age them. The Lavi, it's our easiest Bianco Superiore because we blend, okay, the 90% of Caricante with 10% of Catarratto, but we age it only in steel tanks. Then there is Lindo that is over the top,
Mhm.
we like to say, and it's a 100% of Caricante, and we age it half of it in steel tank and half of it in wood. So that means in tonneau and barrique. And then we blend it at the end.
Are those new barrels, Marco?
No, not new barrels, because that would give too much taste of wood.
Okay.
So it's a third passage, probably, or fourth. Let's say not new barrels.
And what year would you release that after the harvest?
Right now, we are drinking the vintage 2022.
Okay. So again, showing how Caricante, this 100% Caricante, has this great capacity to evolve and to age and to pick up tertiary aromas and flavors that make it such an exciting wine.
Exactly. The peculiarity about the Carricante and the Etna Bianco and Etna Bianco Superiore, it's the thing that you have to age it. It's a kind of different from the normal white wine that you usually drink fresh, kind of fresh. But
Yeah.
you know,
I think that's very important because we don't tend to think of, there are not many Italian white wines that we think of immediately to age and evolve in the way that we consider aging and evolving red wines. So that's a beautiful feature that the best Etna Bianco Superiore wines can reveal. Marco, your vineyards are in the Contrada Salice. Can you explain, just for our listeners who may not be that familiar, what a contrada is on Etna?
yes, absolutely. All right. We said that the main city is Catania, and we go smaller and smaller with the villages, that is, let's say, Milo. And inside of Milo, there is something that comes from the past. There is a division that probably is divided by little rivers or a little mount. And what's inside these divisions are called contrada. To identify better a smaller part of the village. That's the contrada.
Okay, and Salice is one of the contrade of Milo.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
I think from a wine lover's point of view, from a consumer's point of view, it's important to know that what are there? More than 80 contrade on Etna?
Yes,
It's a
yes,
large number, but they are also important as an identification of crew. So wines from the different contrade can really reflect the territory of each unique contrada. Altitude is important for your Bianco wines as well, isn't it, Marco? Your vines are high.
yes. And our vineyard goes from the 400 meters above the level of the sea to 700 meters above the level of the sea. So you have to imagine that in 10 hectares, that is not that big. It's very steep. And so it's all built in terraces. And from one terrace to the other terrace and to the other terrace, it becomes a different terroir. And so plants that are, let's say, we divided our vineyard in two parts. The part of the white, that is the higher part, and the part of the reds, so the Nerello Mascalese and Cappuccio, that is the lower part. Since the reds need more warm to go to maturation and the whites needs a little bit less, so we split the vineyard in these two parts, the higher and the lower.
Okay, okay. Well, that's really interesting to know, and it's also important to note for our listeners that we hear about global warming and climate change and intense heat, but we are on a mountain that's very, very high, and these are very high altitudes for vineyards. So 700 meters is high, and it's partly the altitude that allows the wines, reds as well as whites, to keep their freshness. Is that right?
Yes, it is right. And also, I have to say that the DOC area ends at 1,000 meters above the level of the sea on Mount Etna. So there are even higher vineyards over us.
Yes, absolutely. And some even outside of the DOC that are being planted higher
True.
than 1,000 meters. So it makes Etna such an exciting wine region because so much is happening across the different soils, the different exposures, and the different faces of this huge mountain. Now, let's turn to wines produced from the two grapes you mentioned, Nerello Mascalese and Nerello Cappuccio. I'd like to start with your 100% Nerello Mascalese classic method sparkling wine. I was interested to see that you produced this. I was judging at five-star wines this year, and I tasted some wonderful Nerello Mascalese sparkling, which I hadn't had before. Why are you making your sparkling from a red grape rather than from the Carricante, which with its acidity would lend itself to a high-quality sparkling?
Well, it is a developing situation because right now the disciplinare, which is the rules that gives us how to make our DOC wine, says that we can only use the Nerello Mascalese to make our sparkling wine, so
Okay.
our
Yeah.
spumante
Yeah.
metodo classico.
Mhm.
It takes 5 years to be ready because I explain how we make it. So we collect the grape that is not fully mature, to preserve that acidity that we are talking about. And then it takes a little bit less than a year to become wine. And then we add the yeast and the sugar to react and to become actually a spumante, metodo classic. And then we leave it in this situation for 4 years after we proceed to make the spumante.
So 4 years in the bottle on the yeast sediment, giving it those autolytic flavors that develop as the wine evolves.
Exactly. And I was saying that is a developing situation because right now, in all the meetings that we do with the DOC members, we are talking about making a new spumante with the Carricante finally, which I like it very much. There are some cantinas that already do it, and I love it. I love it. And we are starting this year with the right now the the workers are harvesting in my vineyard while I talk to you. And
Okay.
they are harvesting the Carricante to make the new spumante, which will not be a DOC but an IGT because the disciplinare doesn't let us write it yet, but it's in the talk, you know.
Okay, well, that's very exciting, and I'll look forward to tasting that. But let's turn to your red wines, your two Etna Rosso, and then we'll talk briefly about this special Piedifranco wine,
Mhm.
Piccolo. But let's talk about your Etna Rosso wines.
Yes. So our main Etna Rosso, it's called Clo. Every wine of my vineyard has a nickname of someone of the family. So Clo is dedicated to my sister Claudia, and all her friends used to call her Clo, and that's why the name on the label is Clo. And it's not a 100% Nerello Mascalese, but it's 90% Nerello Mascalese and 10% of Nerello Cappuccio. The Nerello Mascalese naturally has a light color that is fixed by the Nerello Cappuccio. This is a darker color, and so that's why we make this blend. And our Nerello Mascalese is usually paired with very typical Sicilian food, which is arancini al ragù or
Okay.
caponata. You know, it's
Yeah, wonderful.
something that it makes me hungry already.
Me too.
And of course also the salsiccia with finocchietto, you know, the sausage that we make by hand here. Every butcher makes very good sausage.
Oh, the sausage from Lingua Glossa.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I've seen them making that, chopping it with the knives by hand. Extraordinary,
Exactly.
beautiful sausage that is very much something people from Catania love to come up to Lingua Glossa to because it's a real taste of home, isn't it?
It is, it is, it is.
Now, what about your other Etna Rosso, Marco?
Yes, the other Etna Rosso, it's called Pinin. The first vintage that we made is a 2021, and it's not an DOC, but it's an IGT because we weren't sure of all the kind of grapes we were putting in this bottle. When we found this piece of land already with vines, we figured that it wasn't all Nerello Mascalese. It also was the Minnella Bianca, Minnella Nera, and other vines that are a relic now, that are not anymore around Mount Etna. So we wanted to keep the exact blend of the past Etna wine and see what would come out of this blend. And that's what we did. And that's why we didn't call it a DOC wine, but an IGT.
This is the old Piedifranco ungrafted vines that are, what, more than 100 years old, possibly.
Exactly, exactly. Yes.
Okay. And what is this wine called, Marco?
Pinin. And this name Pinin comes after my grandfather, the father of my father. His real name was Giuseppe. And in Italy here, we changed the real name with nicknames.
Okay.
And the normal change for Giuseppe is Pippo or Peppe here in Sicily. But since he fought the Second World War in North Italy, he spent many years there. And when he came back alive from the
Mhm.
Second World War in Sicily, all his friends started to call him Pinin, which is the nickname that is given to the name Giuseppe in North Italy.
Oh, okay. Okay. Marco, what's your nickname?
My name is Lindo,
Oh,
but
so the white wine is your wine.
exactly.
Oh, that's
Because my
great.
father used to call me Marco Lindo when I was younger, of course.
Yeah.
And since it was too long, he started to make it short, and so Lindo is what left of my longer nickname.
Okay, great. Now, Marco, you've talked about some of the foods of to enjoy with your wines at those beautiful arancini, which in Campania are shaped a little bit like a volcano, aren't they? They're the
Yes.
pointed ones rather than the round ones from Palermo.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
then of course the this beautiful hand chopped sausage from Lingua Glossa. But I know you're traveling a lot, selling your wines. You're particularly going to the US, and these are wines that are just beautiful food wines. What are some of the foods that you would suggest that people could enjoy with your wines if they've not yet managed to make it to Etna?
Well, talking about the reds, I have a ready answer. It's like barbecue dishes. You know, in America, you are the master in barbecue dishes, and pulled pork, and something I love is brisket. Oh
Oh,
my
me
God.
too. Yes. Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
for the Rosso. Talking about the white wines, there is a little difference in between the Lavi, that is a little easy drinker, than the Lindo. The Lavi, I would propose it for an aperitivo or the entire meal. The Lindo, since it has the influence of the barrels, I would pair it with a lobster or a more intense flavor fish. You know?
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Yep. No, I can well understand that. And of course, there's that beautiful fish and shellfish you get from Catania. I've been to the fish markets and really,
Right.
really wonderful. What about the Nerello Mascalese, the spumante, the classic method spumante? Beautiful aperitivo, but also a richness and fullness that would allow it to pair with food too.
Yes. Talking about food in the States, I would pair it with fried chicken, which is very popular,
Oh,
or
nice.
tempura. Tempura, it's also fried because, bubbles and the freshness clean the mouth. And so it's perfect pairing for that.
Oh, that sounds great. That's a really, really good suggestion. Final question, Marco. Can our listeners, who, as I say, are located all around the world, can they visit Azienda Agricola Iuppa? And what do you offer as wine hospitality?
All right. Yes, absolutely. They can visit us, and it's my pleasure. All the guests that we receive, I bring them around the vineyard. I explain exactly what I'm talking to you to each one of the guests that we have here. And so we are restoring the old Palmento, and we are making a resort with a pool, with a spa, with 6 suites that have very beautiful views. From some suites, you see the coastline and the vineyard. From other suites, you see the main crater of Mount Etna, of course, the vineyard. And when there are eruptions, you see from the bed, you can see the eruption coming towards the vineyard. But then I said it's safe because we have a natural wall that is called Valle del Bove that contains all the eruptions that come down from the volcano. And so we are about ready. I really hope in the spring to open this resort. But in the meantime, we also have a wine bar that is in the city center of Milo, and we mix the experience of bringing down to the vineyard people and then go back to the wine bar and have the tasting and also some tagliere, which is a wooden table of all typical products from all around Mount Etna. And also in the wine bar, we have representation of all wine producers of Mount Etna. So labels from all the producers of wine of Mount Etna, not only Iuppa.
Okay, well that's really great to hear. Your wine resort sounds fabulous and a really wonderful way for our listeners to really experience what it's like to be on Etna. Actually look up one morning perhaps and see Etna erupting, but also to be in that unique environment looking down on the sea. I like the sound of your wine bar too, with labels from all of the producers. So it's a good point of reference for anybody who wants to explore Etna and taste wines from all of the different contrade located all around this very
Right.
large volcano. Marco, it's been a real pleasure meeting you here. I would love to visit you myself, and I'll try to do so on my next visit. But in the meantime, I know you're ready for the harvest. The grapes are coming in as we
Yes.
speak now. And so I'll let you get back to work. But thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here, and it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Great. Thanks, and buona giornata. We hope today's episode of Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast has transported you to somewhere special. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your pods. Likewise, you can visit us at italianwinepodcast.com. Until next time, chin chin.
This episode is powered by Dialect Imports. You can find all the wine of this winery in their portfolio.